The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage. It was past midnight, and I should have been inside with Jennifer, pretending everything was normal. Instead, I was under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's ancient Buick, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of fixing what was broken. That's when I heard her voice drifting through the thin walls that separated my workspace from our house. "I can't believe he still thinks I love him." My hands froze on the carburetor. Jennifer's voice was barely above a whisper, but in the stillness of Meadowbrook's empty streets, it might as well have been a shout. A man's voice responded, smooth and confident. "He's just a harmless loser, babe. Always has been." I recognized that voice. Derek Matthews, the personal trainer from Jennifer's gym, the guy with the perfect teeth and the expensive car who always seemed to show up wherever my wife happened to be. 22 years of marriage, Jennifer continued, and I could hear the cruel amusement in her tone. He actually thinks I'm working late at the insurance office. Poor pathetic Mike. Poor pathetic Mike. That's what I'd become in my own home. I crept closer to the window that faced our kitchen, staying low behind the workbench where I kept my tools organized in neat rows. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see them clearly. Jennifer was leaning against our kitchen counter, wearing the red silk nightgown I'd bought her for Christmas. Derek was behind her, his hands on her waist, both of them laughing at some private joke. At my expense, apparently. "What if he finds out?" Derek asked, nuzzling her neck. "Mike? He's too busy playing with his cars to notice anything. Besides, even if he did figure it out, what's he going to do? He's a mechanic from Meadowbrook. I'm the one with the real job, the connections, the future." They moved away from the window, heading toward the stairs that led to our bedroom. The bedroom where I'd slept alone more nights than I cared to count over the past 6 months. I stayed crouched behind that workbench for another hour, staring at the tools that had been my father's before me. Each wrench, each screwdriver had a story. They'd built this business, this life, this reputation for honesty in a town where your word still meant something, or used to mean something. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. By the time I heard Derek's car pull out of our driveway, the sun was starting to creep over the horizon. I watched from the garage as he drove past in his flashy red Mustang, probably heading back to his apartment on the other side of town. Jennifer appeared in the kitchen window a few minutes later, making coffee like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just spent the night destroying everything I thought I knew about my life. I waited until she left for work before going inside. The house smelled different now, tainted with cologne and lies. In the kitchen, I found 2 coffee mugs in the sink instead of one. Jennifer had always been careless about covering her tracks. That's when I noticed the phone. It was tucked between the couch cushions in the living room, a cheap flip phone that definitely didn't belong to either of us. Jennifer must have forgotten it in her rush to maintain the charade. I flipped it open and scrolled through the messages. What I found made my stomach turn. Dozens of texts between Jennifer and Derek, going back months. Photos I never wanted to see, plans for weekend getaways I'd been told were work conferences, and worst of all, detailed discussions about how they were going to handle the Mike problem once Jennifer got tired of pretending. "He's so clueless," one message read. "Still brings me flowers every Friday like we're teenagers." "Won't be much longer," Derek had replied. "Once you get that promotion, you can afford to dump him." I sat on my own couch, in my own house, reading about how my wife and her lover planned to discard me like a broken appliance. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the harmless loser. I'd spent my entire adult life in Meadowbrook, building a reputation as someone you could trust. When your car broke down, you brought it to Mike Thompson. When you needed an honest opinion, you asked Mike Thompson. When you wanted someone who'd shoot straight with you, no matter what, you came to Mike Thompson. What Jennifer and Derek didn't understand was that being underestimated was the greatest advantage a man could have. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and went to shower. When Jennifer came home that evening, I greeted her with the same kiss on the cheek I'd given her every day for the past 22 years. "How was work, honey?" I asked, like I actually cared about her answer. "Oh, same old boring insurance stuff. I'm exhausted." She was a good actress. I had to give her that. If I hadn't heard her laughing about my stupidity 12 hours earlier, I might have actually believed the tired act. "I was thinking," I said, hanging up her coat in the hall closet, "maybe we should plan a weekend getaway, just the 2 of us. It's been a while." For just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Fear? It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "That sounds nice, Mike, but I'm swamped at work right now. Maybe next month?" "Next month. when she'd be in the Bahamas with Derek, according to the messages on that hidden phone. Sure, I said. Next month sounds perfect. That night, I lay in bed next to my wife and listened to her breathe. She fell asleep easily, probably dreaming about her new life with her personal trainer boyfriend. Meanwhile, I stared at the ceiling and planned. Jennifer thought she was married to a harmless loser. Derek thought he was stealing another man's wife without consequences. They both thought they were smarter than the small-town mechanic who'd never been anywhere or done anything important. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Because Mike Thompson might be a lot of things, but harmless wasn't one of them. And in a town like Meadowbrook, where everyone knew everyone else's business, there were worse things than being called a loser, like being exposed as a liar. 3 days passed before Jennifer noticed the phone was missing. I watched her tear apart the living room, checking under cushions and behind furniture with increasing desperation. "Looking for something?" I asked from the doorway, sipping my morning coffee. "Just my reading glasses," she lied smoothly. I could have sworn I left them on the coffee table. "Ah, they're on your nightstand upstairs, same place you always leave them." The look she gave me was pure venom, quickly masked by a grateful smile. "You're right. Thanks, honey." I'd already memorized every message, every photo, every damning detail from that phone before dropping it in the lake behind our house. But Jennifer didn't know that. She was probably wondering if Derek had taken it, or if she'd lost it somewhere compromising. Let her wonder. The beauty of Meadowbrook was its size. 37,000 people, all connected by invisible threads of gossip, business relationships, and shared history. When you grew up here like I had, you learned to navigate those connections like a spider navigating its web. Jennifer had lived here for 22 years, but she'd never really understood how the town worked. She saw it as a stepping stone, a place to build her career before moving on to something bigger. She'd never bothered to learn the intricate social dynamics that governed everything from who got promoted at the bank to who got invited to the annual Chamber of Commerce dinner. That ignorance was going to cost her. My first stop was Betty's Diner on Main Street, where the morning coffee crowd gathered to discuss everything from the weather to the latest scandals. I'd been coming here since I was 16, and Betty Kowalski had been serving coffee and collecting secrets for longer than most people had been alive. "Morning, Mike," Betty called from behind the counter as I slid onto my usual stool. "The regular?" "Please." I nodded to the other regulars, Tom Bradley from the hardware store, Jim Peterson, who ran the local newspaper, and Father Murphy from St. Mary's. "How's everyone doing?" The conversation flowed around me like it always did. Tom's wife was having trouble with her car again. Jim was struggling to find interesting stories for the paper. Father Murphy was worried about declining attendance at Sunday Mass. I listened and nodded and made appropriate comments, but I was really studying the dynamics. Who trusted whom, who owed favors, who had secrets they'd rather keep buried. "Speaking of cars," Tom said, turning to me, "my daughter's been going to that new gym on Elm Street. Says the trainer there drives a fancy red Mustang. You know anything about those cars, Mike?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "Mustangs? Sure. Flashy cars for people who care more about looking fast than being reliable. Why?" "Just curious. Sarah says the guy's always bragging about how much money he makes, but she heard from her friend who works at the bank that he's behind on his car payments." "Interesting." I filed that information away for later use. "People who brag about money usually don't have as much as they claim," I said. "In my experience, the folks who are actually doing well don't need to advertise it." Father Murphy nodded sagely. "Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." "Proverbs," I said. "Good chapter." After breakfast, I drove across town to Derek's gym. It was one of those modern fitness centers with floor-to-ceiling windows and motivational posters featuring impossibly muscled models. Derek's red Mustang was parked right in front, taking up 2 spaces. I parked my pickup truck, a 15-year-old Ford that ran like new thanks to regular maintenance, in a spot where I could observe without being obvious. Through the windows, I could see Derek leading a group fitness class, his artificially white teeth gleaming as he shouted encouragement at a room full of middle-aged women in expensive workout clothes. My wife was in the front row, wearing brand-new athletic gear that probably cost more than most people in Meadowbrook made in a week. I sat there for 20 minutes, watching Derek preen and pose while Jennifer hung on his every word. When the class ended, I saw her approach him with what looked like a casual question. He leaned in close to answer, his hand lingering on her shoulder just a moment too long. Anyone watching might think it was innocent, a friendly trainer helping a client, but I knew better. I also knew something Derek didn't know I knew. That afternoon, I paid a visit to my old friend Carl Rodriguez at First National Bank. Carl and I had gone to high school together, and he'd been the loan officer who'd helped me expand my garage 5 years ago. Mike Thompson, Carl said, standing up from behind his desk to shake my hand. Good to see you. How's business? Can't complain. Listen, Carl, I need a favor. It's about my wife. His expression immediately became more serious. In a small town, when a man starts asking questions about his wife, it usually means trouble. What kind of favor? Jennifer's been talking about making some big purchases. New car, maybe renovating the house. I want to make sure we're in good shape financially before we commit to anything major. Can you pull our account information? It was a reasonable request from a husband who shared a joint checking account with his wife. Carl pulled up the records on his computer, and what he showed me confirmed what I'd suspected. Large cash withdrawals over the past 3 months, always on days when Jennifer claimed to be working late. Always in amounts that would cover a nice dinner, a hotel room, or a weekend getaway. Looks like Jennifer's been treating herself, Carl said diplomatically. Nothing wrong with that, of course. You two work hard. Of course, I agreed. We deserve nice things. But as I left the bank, I was already planning how to use this information. Jennifer thought she was being clever, using our joint account to fund her affair. She probably figured I never looked at the statements closely enough to notice. She was right about that. Until now. That evening, Jennifer came home from her late night at the office, smelling like Derek's cologne. She kissed my cheek and apologized for missing dinner again. The Henderson claim is turning into a real mess, she said, not meeting my eyes. I might have to work late again tomorrow. No problem, I said. I understand how important your work is. She looked surprised by my easy acceptance. Over the past few months, I'd started asking more questions about her schedule, expressing mild frustration about her long hours. Now I was back to being the understanding husband who never complained. It made her nervous. Are you feeling okay, Mike? You seem different lately. Different how? I don't know. Quieter, I guess. More thoughtful. I smiled at her, the same smile I'd been giving her for 22 years. Just thinking about the future, honey. About what we want our lives to look like. That night, after Jennifer fell asleep, I sat in my garage and made a list. Not a list of grievances or evidence, but a list of connections. Every person in Meadowbrook who mattered. Every relationship that could be leveraged. Every secret that could be weaponized. Jennifer and Derek thought they were playing a game with no consequences. They thought they could humiliate me, discard me, and move on with their lives without anyone caring about the harmless loser they'd left behind. They were about to learn that in a town like Meadowbrook, reputation was everything, and I was about to become very interested in theirs. The thing about small towns that outsiders never understand is how information flows. It's not like the internet, where news travels instantly to everyone at once. It's more like a river system, with tributaries and currents and eddies that carry stories to exactly the right people at exactly the right time. I'd spent 45 years learning to read those currents. My daughter Ashley came home from college that weekend, full of stories about her sorority and her classes and her plans for the future. At 21, she was everything Jennifer had been when I first met her. Beautiful, ambitious, convinced that the world owed her something special. Dad, you look tired, she said over dinner Saturday night. Are you getting enough sleep? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just busy with work. Jennifer reached across the table to squeeze my hand in a show of wifely concern. Your father's been working too hard lately. I keep telling him he needs to hire more help. Maybe you should listen to Mom, Ashley said. You're not getting any younger. There it was, the casual cruelty that seemed to run in the family. Ashley had inherited her mother's sharp tongue and her complete lack of awareness about how her words affected other people. You're probably right, I said mildly. I should start thinking about slowing down. After dinner, I retreated to my garage while Jennifer and Ashley had their mother-daughter bonding time. Through the window, I could see them in the living room, heads bent together over Ashley's phone, probably looking at pictures from some college party or gossiping about Ashley's friends. They looked so similar in that moment. The same blonde hair, the same perfect posture, the same expression of smug superiority. Like they were part of some exclusive club that didn't have room for middle-aged mechanics who smelled like motor oil and honest work. That's when I heard Ashley say something that made my hands clench around the wrench I was holding. Mom, why did you even marry Dad? I mean, he's nice and everything, but you could have done so much better. Jennifer's laugh was like broken glass. Oh, honey, you have no idea. When I was your age, I thought love was enough. I thought being with a good man mattered more than ambition or success or having a real future. But you figured it out eventually, right? I mean, look at you now. You're basically running that insurance office. It took me a while, but yes, I figured out what really matters in life. So what are you going to do about Dad? There was a long pause. I pressed closer to the window, straining to hear Jennifer's response. Let's just say I'm working on it. There are some changes coming, Ashley, big changes. And when they happen, you and I are going to have the kind of life we deserve. What kind of changes? The kind that require patience and careful planning. But don't worry about it, sweetheart. Mommy has everything under control. I'd heard enough. I spent the rest of the evening in the garage, pretending to work while really thinking about what I'd learned. Jennifer wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave me, and she'd already started poisoning our daughter against me. The next morning, Ashley left to drive back to college. As I watched her car disappear down our street, I realized that I'd already lost her. Whatever relationship we'd had was gone, sacrificed on the altar of Jennifer's ambition and manipulation. That hurt worse than the affair, but it also clarified things. Jennifer had made her choice. She'd chosen Derek, chosen her fantasy of a better life, chosen to turn our daughter into an accomplice in my humiliation. Fine. If she wanted to play for keeps, we'd play for keeps. Monday morning, I made a phone call to my old friend Danny Morrison. Danny ran a private investigation service out of his home office, mostly doing background checks for local businesses and the occasional cheating spouse case. Mike Thompson, Danny said when he answered. Haven't heard from you in ages. What can I do for you? I need information on someone, Derek Matthews. He's a personal trainer at that new gym on Elm Street. There was a pause. In a town like Meadowbrook, when someone asks for information on their wife's fitness trainer, the implications are pretty clear. This official business, Mike? Let's call it due diligence. I'm thinking about investing in his gym. It was a plausible lie. I had enough money saved to make small business investments, and everyone knew I was always looking for ways to diversify beyond the garage. Give me a few days, Danny said. I'll see what I can find. While Danny worked his contacts, I started my own investigation. I began with Derek's social media accounts, which painted a picture of a man desperate to project success. Photos of expensive meals, exotic vacations, designer clothes, all of it carefully curated to suggest wealth and sophistication. But I knew how to look beyond the surface. The expensive meals were always at chain restaurants during happy hour specials. The exotic vacations were weekend trips to nearby cities, photographed to look more impressive than they were. The designer clothes were knockoffs, obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. Derek Matthews was a fraud, living beyond his means and desperate to maintain an image he couldn't afford. That gave me leverage. I also started paying more attention to the gossip networks that flowed through Meadowbrook like underground streams. A comment here, a casual question there, and I began to piece together Derek's reputation around town. The women at his gym thought he was charming, but several had mentioned that he seemed to pay special attention to the married ones with expensive cars and jewelry. The men who'd tried to befriend him found him arrogant and dismissive. The business owners who dealt with him described him as unreliable with payments and quick to make excuses. Derek Matthews was not well liked in Meadowbrook. People tolerated him because he was new and because his gym filled a need, but he hadn't built the kind of deep relationships that mattered in a small town. That was his weakness. Meanwhile, Jennifer continued her charade of working late nights and weekend conferences. She'd gotten careless, probably because she thought I was too stupid to notice the inconsistencies in her stories. Like the conference in Chicago that she'd mentioned 3 different dates for, or the client dinner that supposedly ran until midnight on a Tuesday, or the way she always came home from these work events with her makeup refreshed and her hair styled differently. I documented everything, not because I planned to use it in court. I had no intention of dragging this through a messy divorce, but because information was power, and I was going to need all the power I could get. Danny called me back on Thursday with his report on Derek. Your boy's in trouble, Mike. He's 3 months behind on his car payments, 2 months behind on his rent, and he owes money to at least 4 different credit card companies. The gym's barely breaking even, and he's been borrowing against the equipment to cover operating expenses. How bad is it? Bad enough that he's probably looking for a way out, or a way to get his hands on some quick cash. Like a wealthy insurance manager with a joint checking account and a husband who didn't pay attention to the statements. Thanks, Danny. I owe you one. Mike, be careful, okay? Guys like Matthews, when they get desperate, they don't always make smart choices. I appreciated the warning, but Danny didn't understand. I wasn't worried about Derek making smart choices. I was counting on him making stupid ones. That night, Jennifer came home with another story about working late. This time, she claimed to have been reviewing files for a major client presentation. How did it go? I asked, looking up from the newspaper I was reading. Really well. I think we're going to land the account. That's great, honey. What company was it again? For just a moment, she looked blank. She hadn't expected me to ask for details. Morrison Industries, she said finally. I nodded and went back to my newspaper. Morrison Industries had gone out of business 6 months ago. Everyone in Meadowbrook knew that because Danny Morrison's father had owned the company for 30 years before the economy forced him to shut down. Jennifer didn't know I knew that, just like she didn't know I knew about Derek's financial problems, or the way the town gossips were starting to whisper about the insurance manager who'd been seen around town with the flashy personal trainer. She thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was about to learn the difference between being smart and being wise. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning in October. I was having coffee at Betty's Diner when Margaret Foster, who worked as a receptionist at Jennifer's insurance office, slid into the booth across from me. "Mike, can I talk to you about something? It's about Jennifer." Margaret was 63 years old, had worked at Meadowbrook Insurance for 25 years, and possessed the kind of institutional knowledge that made her indispensable. She also had a reputation for discretion, which meant that if she was talking to me, the situation was serious. "What's on your mind, Margaret?" "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I'm worried about her. About both of you, really." She glanced around the diner to make sure no one was listening, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. "Jennifer's been acting strange lately. Coming in late, leaving early, making personal phone calls during work hours. And yesterday, I overheard her talking to someone about taking out a loan against her life insurance policy. That got my attention." "A loan?" "A big one, $50,000. She was asking about the paperwork, how long it would take to process, whether you'd need to sign anything as her spouse." I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. $50,000 was enough for Derek to pay off his debts and disappear. It was also enough for Jennifer to start a new life somewhere else. Did she say what the money was for? "Home improvements," she claimed. "But Mike, I've been doing this job for a quarter century. When someone starts borrowing against their life insurance, it's usually because they're planning something big." I thanked Margaret and assured her that everything was fine, just some financial planning that Jennifer was handling. But as I drove back to the garage, I realized that my wife's timeline had accelerated. She wasn't just planning to leave me anymore. She was planning to disappear. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Bob Hendricks, and made an appointment to review my will and insurance policies. Bob had handled my father's estate and had been the family attorney for 15 years. "Just want to make sure everything's in order," I told him. "Jennifer's been talking about updating our financial planning." "Smart thinking, Mike. A lot of couples your age start taking these things more seriously." What Bob found when he pulled my files made my suspicions look conservative. "Mike, did you know that Jennifer changed the beneficiary on your life insurance policy 6 months ago?" "Changed it how?" "She removed Ashley as the secondary beneficiary and made herself the sole beneficiary. She also increased the coverage amount from $200,000 to $500,000. I sat back in the leather chair across from Bob's desk, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. "She can do that without telling me?" "Technically, yes. As your spouse, she has the authority to make changes to policies where she's already listed as a beneficiary. The insurance company sent notices to your home address, but Jennifer handles all the mail." Bob nodded grimly. "Mike, I've seen this pattern before. Usually it doesn't end well for the husband." I left Bob's office with copies of all my financial documents and a sick feeling in my stomach. Jennifer wasn't just planning to leave me, she was planning for me to have an accident. That night, I paid extra attention to my food and drinks. I checked my truck for signs of tampering. I made sure someone knew where I was at all times. I also started making some calls. The first was to Ashley at college. When she answered, I could hear party music in the background. "Dad, is everything okay? You never call me at school." "I just wanted to hear your voice, sweetheart. How are your classes going?" "They're fine. Dad, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to warn her about what her mother was planning, about how she'd been manipulated into thinking I was worthless and expendable. Instead, I said, "Nothing's wrong. I just love you, Ashley. Whatever happens, I want you to remember that your old man loves you more than anything in this world." "Dad, you're really freaking me out. Are you sick or something?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just feeling sentimental. Give me a call this weekend, okay?" After I hung up, I sat in my garage for a long time, thinking about the little girl who used to help me work on cars. Ashley had been 8 years old when I taught her how to change oil, 12 when she learned to replace brake pads, 16 when she rebuilt her first engine. Somewhere along the way, Jennifer had convinced her that those memories didn't matter, that the man who taught her everything about cars and responsibility and honest work was somehow beneath her. That hurt, but it also made me angry. The second call was to Danny Morrison. "Danny, I need another favor. I want you to follow Jennifer tomorrow night. She's supposed to be working late, but I don't think she'll be at the office. Mike, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes it's better not to know. I already know, Danny. I just need proof. The next evening, Jennifer kissed my cheek and told me she'd be home late. Another client dinner, she said. Very important potential account. Drive safely, I told her. I love you. She paused at the door, something flickering across her face that might have been guilt or regret. For a moment, I thought she might change her mind, might confess everything and beg for forgiveness. Instead, she said, I love you too, Mike, and walked out to her car. An hour later, Danny called. She's at the Riverside Motel on Highway 9, room 237. Derek's car is in the parking lot. The Riverside Motel was the kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be seen. It was also where people went when they couldn't afford anything better. How long have they been there? About 30 minutes. Mike, what do you want me to do? Nothing. Just document everything. Photos, times, license plates. But stay out of sight. I hung up and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The good stuff I saved for special occasions. Then I sat in my living room and thought about 22 years of marriage. The early days when we were both young and stupid and thought love could conquer anything. The struggles when money was tight and the garage was barely breaking even. The joy when Ashley was born and we thought we had everything we'd ever need. Somewhere along the way, Jennifer had decided it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. That was her choice to make. But trying to eliminate me so she could start fresh with my insurance money? That crossed a line I couldn't ignore. My phone buzzed with a text message from Danny. Photos of Jennifer and Derek entering the motel room together, timestamp clearly visible. I forwarded the photos to my own email account, then deleted them from my phone. Evidence for later, when I needed it. Jennifer came home at 11:30, claiming the client dinner had run long. She smelled like cheap motel soap and Derek's cologne, but she kissed my forehead and apologized for being so late. How did the dinner go? I asked. Really well. I think we're going to get the contract. That's wonderful, honey. You work so hard for that company. She looked at me strangely, like she was trying to figure out if I was being sarcastic, but I kept my expression neutral, the same mild interest I'd always shown in her work. I'm exhausted, she said. I'm going to bed. I'll be up in a few minutes. Just want to finish watching the news. After she went upstairs, I sat in the dark living room and planned. Jennifer thought she was married to a harmless fool who would never see her betrayal coming. Derek thought he was stealing another man's wife without consequences. They were both wrong, but I wasn't going to confront them directly. That would be messy and emotional and ultimately pointless. Instead, I was going to use the one thing I understood better than either of them. I was going to use Meadowbrook itself. In a small town, reputation is everything, and I was about to teach Jennifer and Derek what happens when you underestimate the power of a man who spent his entire life building relationships based on trust and honesty. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But we were going to play by my rules, in my town, with my network of allies, and I was going to win. The plan came together like a well-tuned engine, each piece fitting perfectly into place, every component serving its purpose in the larger machine. I started with Derek's landlord, a guy named Pete Kowalski, who owned half the rental properties in town. Pete was Betty's nephew, and he'd been coming to my garage for 20 years. Pete, I heard you might have some commercial space coming available, I said when I stopped by his office. I'm thinking about expanding the business. Always got something opening up, Mike? What kind of space you looking for? Maybe something like that gym on Elm Street. That's a nice setup Derek's got there. Pete's expression darkened. That piece of garbage owes me 3 months' rent. I'm about ready to evict him. 3 months? That's rough. Guy keeps promising he's got money coming in, some big investment or something, but promises don't pay the bills. I nodded sympathetically. You know, if you do end up evicting him, I might be interested in taking over the lease. That's a good location. I'll keep that in mind, Mike. You've always been reliable. The next stop was Derek's bank. I didn't know anyone there personally, but I knew someone who did. Margaret Foster's daughter worked as a teller at First National, and she owed me a favor from when I'd fixed her car for free after she'd graduated nursing school. Hi, Susan. How's the new job going? Really well, Mr. Thompson. Thanks again for everything you did for me. Happy to help. Listen, I have a business question. I'm thinking about partnering with someone on an investment, but I want to make sure they're financially stable. Is there a way to check someone's credit history? Well, I can't give you specific account information, but if you're considering a business partnership, you could ask them to provide their own credit report as part of the due diligence process. That makes sense. The person I'm thinking about is Derek Matthews. Do you know him? Susan's face told me everything I needed to know. Mr. Thompson, if you're thinking about going into business with Derek Matthews, you might want to be very careful. That's all I can say. I appreciate the advice. By Thursday, I had a complete picture of Derek's financial situation. He was drowning in debt, behind on every payment, and desperate enough to do something stupid, which was exactly what I was counting on. That evening, Jennifer announced she was going to another work conference, this one in Indianapolis, over the weekend. It's a big opportunity, Mike. The regional office wants to discuss my promotion. That's great, honey. You deserve it. She looked surprised by my enthusiasm. Over the past few weeks, I'd been subtly more supportive of her career, more encouraging about her late nights and weekend work. It was making her nervous. You don't mind me being gone for 3 days? Of course not. I want you to succeed, Jennifer. I want you to have everything you've ever dreamed of. That was true in a way. I did want her to have what she deserved. She just wasn't going to like what that turned out to be. After Jennifer left Friday morning, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. First, I called Pete Kowalski. Pete, it's Mike Thompson. I've been thinking about that gym space we discussed. What would it take to accelerate Derek's eviction? Well, if I had proof he was using the space for something other than what's specified in the lease, I could terminate immediately. What kind of proof? Photos, witness statements, that sort of thing. Why? Let me get back to you on that. Next, I called Danny Morrison. Danny, I need you to keep watching Derek this weekend, but this time, I want you to be seen. Seen? Mike, that goes against everything I know about surveillance. Trust me on this one. I want Derek to know he's being watched. Make him paranoid. If you say so, but this is your show. The beauty of small-town psychology is that everyone knows everyone else's business, but they pretend they don't. Secrets exist in plain sight, maintained by a collective agreement not to acknowledge what everyone can see. I was about to shatter that agreement. Saturday morning, I drove to the gym and parked across the street. Derek's car was there, along with several others I recognized, including my wife's. I sat there for an hour, making sure other people saw me. Mrs. Patterson walked by and waved. Tom Bradley drove past and honked his horn. Father Murphy nodded to me from the sidewalk. By noon, half the town would know that Mike Thompson had been sitting outside Derek's gym, watching. That evening, I went to Murphy's Tavern, the local bar where the working-class crowd gathered on weekends. I ordered a beer and sat at the end of the bar, looking like a man with something on his mind. It didn't take long for people to start asking questions. You okay, Mike? You look like someone stole your dog. Just thinking about some business decisions, I said. You ever have one of those situations where you know something's wrong, but you're not sure what to do about it? What kind of wrong? I shrugged and took a sip of beer. The kind where people you trust turn out to be different than you thought? Word travels fast in a small town, especially when it involves someone as well known as Mike Thompson looking troubled at Murphy's Tavern on a Saturday night. By Sunday morning, the gossip network was buzzing with speculation about what was bothering me. That's when I made my next move. I called Ashley at college. Dad? 2 phone calls in 1 week? Now I'm really worried. Sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Has your mother said anything to you about our marriage? About any problems we might be having? There was a long pause. Dad, I don't think I should get in the middle of whatever's going on between you and Mom. So she has said something. She mentioned that you two have been growing apart, that maybe you want different things out of life. What kind of different things? I don't know, Dad. She said you're content with your little garage and your small-town life, but she has bigger ambitions. She said sometimes people outgrow each other. And what do you think about that, Ashley? Another pause. I think Mom deserves to be happy, and if that means making some changes, then maybe that's what needs to happen. Even if those changes hurt other people? Dad, you're putting me in an impossible position here. You're right. I'm sorry. I just wanted to hear your voice. After I hung up, I sat in my garage and thought about the little girl who used to believe her daddy could fix anything. Jennifer had done a thorough job of turning her against me, convincing her that ambition mattered more than loyalty, that success justified betrayal. That was the part that hurt the most, but it also strengthened my resolve. Monday morning, I drove to the insurance office where Jennifer worked. I didn't go inside. I just parked across the street and waited. At 11:30, Derek's red Mustang pulled into the parking lot. He went inside and stayed for 20 minutes. When he came out, he was carrying an envelope. I followed him at a distance as he drove to First National Bank. He went inside with the envelope and came out empty-handed. Then I followed him to his apartment, where he loaded 2 suitcases into his car. Derek Matthews was getting ready to run, which meant Jennifer had given him the money from her insurance loan, which meant it was time for the final act. I drove home and called Pete Kowalski. "Pete, it's Mike. I think Derek's about to skip town without paying his rent. If you want to catch him, you better move fast." "How do you know?" "Let's just say I've been keeping an eye on the situation. You might want to check his apartment and the gym. I have a feeling he's cleared out both." Next, I called the Meadowbrook Police Department and asked for Officer Janet Mills, who'd been a friend of the family for years. "Janet, it's Mike Thompson. I think I might have information about a fraud case you'll want to investigate." "What kind of fraud, Mike?" "The kind where someone takes out loans under false pretenses and then disappears with the money." By Tuesday morning, Derek Matthews was gone. His apartment was empty, his gym was abandoned, and his debts remained unpaid. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd taken Jennifer with him. Wednesday morning, I got a call from Jennifer's boss at the insurance company. "Mike, I'm sorry to bother you, but Jennifer didn't come to work today and she's not answering her phone. We have an important client meeting this afternoon." "That's strange," I said. "She left for that conference in Indianapolis, but she should have been back yesterday." "What conference?" "Jennifer didn't have any conferences scheduled this week." "Oh, well, maybe I misunderstood. I'm sure she'll call when she can." But Jennifer didn't call, because Jennifer was somewhere in Mexico with Derek Matthews, spending my insurance money and thinking she'd gotten away with the perfect crime. What she didn't know was that I'd been expecting this. What she didn't know was that I'd documented everything. And what she really didn't know was that Derek Matthews had a gambling problem that made him even more unreliable than she'd realized. The money would be gone within a month. Derek would abandon her as soon as he found his next mark, and Jennifer would be stuck in a foreign country with no resources, no friends, and no way home, unless she wanted to face the fraud charges that were waiting for her back in Meadowbrook. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on my front porch, watching the sun set over the town I'd called home for 45 years. My phone rang. Ashley's number. "Dad, I just heard about Mom. Is it true? Did she really run away with that trainer guy?" "I'm afraid so, sweetheart." "I can't believe it. I mean, I knew you two were having problems, but this—" "Your mother made her choice, Ashley. She chose excitement over stability, fantasy over reality. I can't say I'm surprised. Dad, I'm so sorry. I said some terrible things to you, and I believed Mom when she said you were holding her back. I should have known better. You were just being loyal to your mother. I can't fault you for that. What are you going to do now?" I looked out at Meadowbrook's quiet streets, at the neighbors who'd known me my entire life, at the town that had always been my home. "I'm going to keep living, sweetheart. I'm going to keep running my garage, keep being honest with people, keep being the man your grandfather raised me to be. And Mom? Your mother will have to live with the consequences of her choices, just like the rest of us." After I hung up, I sat on that porch until the stars came out. Jennifer had underestimated me. She'd thought she was married to a harmless fool who would never see her betrayal coming. She'd been wrong about that. But she'd also been wrong about something else. She'd thought that leaving me would destroy me, that I'd be lost without her, that I'd spend the rest of my life mourning what I'd lost. Instead, I felt free. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The last honest man in Meadowbrook was finally free to be himself, and that felt like victory enough.